Welcome back to the Taiken Ramen channel. It's a very special time of year in the United States because we're all about to celebrate Thanksgiving. If you're not from the United States or don't know, this is the time of year where we celebrate Europeans' arrival to the New World, and we do so by celebrating the foods they found when they got here, which means that this is really the inception of American cuisine. It's a time of gathering, families get together typically in a big group, so you have to scale the food and make a ton of it. It leads to this classic problem where you have lots of Thanksgiving leftover foods, and today I'm going to be talking about how you can make a delicious bowl of ramen out of those Thanksgiving leftovers. Forget the boring turkey sandwich that you make every year. Go get yourself a high quality pack of ramen, whip up some tare, throw some leftover turkey in there. It really is soup season. There's a ton of classic Thanksgiving foods, the primary being a big turkey. After that, you typically have some kind of a dressing or stuffing if it goes inside the turkey, which is really like a bread salad. It's kind of weird now that I think about it. But as well, you've got cranberry sauce. A lot of people do mashed potatoes, and then green beans are like a really common thing. Green bean salad of some kind is pretty common. My plan for the bowl is to use a turkey carcass to make a clear chintan broth, use big smoked turkey leg as the main protein. I'm gonna top it up with dressing, some karage style deep fried green beans, and then I'll throw a marinated egg on there because it's ramen, why not? I'm gonna make an aroma oil with cranberry, rosemary, sage, sugar, like a lot of really classic Thanksgiving flavors. And then the tare for the bowl is going to be sake based, so wine based, with lots of New World flavors like oranges, cloves, that sort of thing. But overall, I am going to keep it to a shio tare so that we don't get in the way of the American cuisine too much. This is my plan for how I wanted it all to look. I've got a couple of potential designs here, and we can compare and contrast when this is done with how I did. And I am making this video in advance of Thanksgiving so that it's ready for you on Thanksgiving, which means I'm not really working with leftovers. I'm making all of these components from scratch. But through the video, I will be talking about how you can use your leftovers so that you don't have to go through all the work I'm about to do. But with that being said, let's get cooking. So I'll start off talking about the broth, and before we can even get into the broth, we've got to go to the store and pick up a frozen turkey. There's a huge variety with how people prepare the Thanksgiving turkeys. Some people like deep fry the entire thing. I would say the most common way people cook a Thanksgiving turkey is just roasting it in the oven, but I didn't really want to do a full Thanksgiving roast. I only need like an amount of turkey that you might have if you had Thanksgiving leftovers. So what I did was I butchered up a turkey carcass, and then I in particular saved the turkey breasts and turkey legs because I thought those would smoke up the nicest. After removing as much meat as I could from the bird, I took the remaining frame of the bird and I cut it into pieces that would fit in my stock pot. And then I covered that turkey carcass in about 10 cups of water. I've made quite a few chicken broths and stocks on this channel before, and when I put the turkey in the pot, as opposed to like a chicken, I was just getting a lot of blood coming out of the carcass. So I actually let this sit in my fridge overnight. A lot of the blood came out, and then I put a fresh 10 cups of water on it the next day before boiling it. And when it was time to boil, I just slowly brought the heat up to a bare simmer, and I let the turkey parts simmer there for about 6 hours, at which point I had a really nice golden chintan. This step of making your own broth is really over the top. If you're just trying for something low effort that's gonna make use of your Thanksgiving leftovers, this part is not necessary. Just plan to use the soup base for whatever instant ramen you go buy at the store. With that being said, let's move on to the tare. That's broth complete. So as mentioned, I wanted the tare to start with a sake. A lot of people are having wine on Thanksgiving, and having it be sake makes it feel a little bit like ramen. This whole process starts with 3 teaspoons each of uncracked black pepper and cloves. And I'm gonna put these on medium heat and just let them cook up a little bit until they start to smoke. At that point, I'm throwing on 2 cups of sake and letting that boil, absorb some of those spice flavors and let all the alcohol boil off, and that's gonna happen in about 5 minutes. After I can't smell the alcohol anymore, I sliced up and added 1 entire orange, about 5 inches of ginger, and then the innards of 1 pomegranate. Finally, I threw on a handful of cranberries, and then I got out my mashed potato masher, and I just kind of like squished these things to make sure all the flavors were getting in there. And I also reduced the heat to a simmer. I don't want this to be too thick. After about 10 minutes of simmering, I got out a strainer and I took out all the solid components. And then I added 3/4 cup of mirin, 2 tablespoons and 2 teaspoons of sea salt, and 2 teaspoons of MSG. If we want to be technical about it, this is a shio tare. Shoyu tare would require some kind of a soy sauce element, and then miso would need miso paste. Although those things would have been delicious with Thanksgiving leftovers, I wanted this to be a more American food with a ramen twist as opposed to the other way around. And the Pilgrims most certainly were not having like kikoman at their first Thanksgiving feast. Anyway, our work here is done. If you're doing like the pack noodles lower effort version of this, you don't need to go through all the trouble of making this tare. I would grab as many of these ingredients as you have sitting around the house, with the exception of the salt, because you're going to get a lot of that in your ramen packet, and it's okay if you don't have all of them. And then just combine them over low heat, strain out the solids, and when you are assembling your ramen, you probably only need about a tablespoon of this stuff in order to bring some nostalgic Thanksgiving flavors into your Thanksgiving leftovers ramen. All right, with that, we have tare complete. For the noodles, I wanted something a bit bitier, kind of reminiscent to that hardtack stuff that we all had to eat when we were learning about Thanksgiving in elementary school. You guys ate hardtack, right? Anyway, it's a 35% hydration bread flour noodle with a 5% rye flour adjunct. I did a 3% vital wheat gluten adjunct to give it a little more bite, but really where that bite comes from is I used 80% potassium carbonate. This is type 3 Kansui from the Ramen Supply Company, so it's also got phosphates in there to encourage hydration. And because I was reflecting on the settlers in the early days of this country, I made these noodles without any electricity. It's pretty similar to my normal process. I just mixed everything up by hand and then stomped on it as I usually do with my double layer Tupperware thing. After that, I rolled everything out with my Atlas 150, and then I cut the noodles. They're about 2mm square noodles. These noodles really did come out exceptional. I think the Pilgrims would have been proud. And of course, if you're doing these noodles at home, you just need to go to the store. I would buy the highest quality instant noodle pack that you can find. Any of the pack ramens that have the word gold on them are probably going to be a good idea. And you just cook those up to the package instructions. With that being said, that is noodles complete. All right, next we're gonna do the aroma oil. I just got a mason jar and started filling it up about halfway with some fresh cranberries. On top of that, I did a sprig of sage, 1 stem of rosemary, about a tablespoon of cloves, and then finally 3 tablespoons of brown sugar. I got some neutral flavored oil heated up to about 350 degrees, and then I slowly ladled it into the heat-proof jar, and everything cooked up and mashed up so nicely. I gave this a little stir just to encourage mingling, and then I let this sit on the counter for about 3 days before it was time to serve. If you're doing this with your leftovers and particularly don't want to go this over the top, an easy substitution is just get about half a stick of butter, melt it down, and then throw as many of these components, cranberries, sage, rosemary, cloves, and brown sugar, right onto a skillet and just cook those things into the butter. After cooking those things together for about 5 minutes, you're gonna have a really easy aroma oil with none of the drama or danger. And there you go. That's aroma oil complete. Next up, the star of the show was the protein. I wanted this big, dramatic turkey leg sticking out of the bowl, just making it an unmistakable Thanksgiving dish. So if you're making this with leftovers, then you are gonna need to elbow grandma out of the way, grab that turkey leg, and then put it under your bed or something so nobody else takes it. But no matter how you prepare your turkey or what part of the turkey is left, you're really only going to need about 1/4 pound of turkey meat in order to top up the bowl. The way I prepared mine was I cut those turkey legs off the bird and then I marinated them first in a plastic bag. I did 1/2 cup of soy sauce, 1 tablespoon of salt, 3 tablespoons of brown sugar, and then 1 tablespoon each of garlic and ginger paste. I left them in this bag to marinate for about 3 days before smoking. I put those in a 250-degree smoker until the internal temperature of the turkey legs reached 170 degrees Fahrenheit. That took roughly 4 hours. If you're cooking turkey, you really only need to get the turkey to 165 degrees to be safe, but pushing it just that 5 degrees further up to 170 causes all of the collagen in the legs to break down and it gets oh so soft. Of course, liquid collagen is like what makes tonkotsu, so it's also nostalgic to ramen. These things came out of the smoker looking absolutely divine, and if you can believe it, they smelled even better than they looked, and they tasted even better than they smelled. This was absolutely Thanksgiving supreme ultimate topping. There you go, that's protein complete. All right, we've got 3 additional toppings to get through: the dressing, the deep fried green beans, and the marinated egg. Starting with the dressing, I chopped up about 3 cups of bread into 1-inch cubes. I used sourdough that I got at the store. I set that aside, and then I rough chopped 1 white onion, about 5 stalks of celery, and about 20 sage leaves, and the sprigs of rosemary off of 1 stem. Into a skillet, I put about 2 tablespoons of our cranberry aroma oil, followed by all the vegetables I had just cut up. I added salt and pepper to taste, and then I went back to the turkey broth, which had been cooling down. Turkeys don't have a ton of fat on them, but the fat that was in this turkey carcass had boiled up to the top and hardened. So I scooped that off the top of the broth, and then I threw that in the dressing. After that all cooked in and the vegetables were starting to soften, I added about 1 cup of turkey broth, and then finally all of the sourdough bread pieces. I put all of this in a glass baking dish, and then I put that in a 350 degree oven for about a half hour, just until the bread started to turn that brown toasty color. Next up, it's the green beans. I did these karage style, so that's like Japanese deep fried. I took the green beans, I drenched them in beaten egg, and then potato starch. I made a seasoning combination out of cinnamon, brown sugar, and salt. And then I fried these in neutral oil at 350 degrees. And then I used the frying oil to combine with the seasoning mix in order to make a sauce. And then I tossed the fried green beans in the sauce. I don't know anybody who makes their Thanksgiving green beans this way. Most people like saute them up in bacon grease or something. However you choose to make your green beans, those can go right on this bowl of leftovers. But if you're watching this video ahead of Thanksgiving, I'd highly recommend trying these fried green beans and potato starch because they were freaking delicious. Something about that karage fry, it just like feels like you're eating snow. Very fun texture. Anyway, moving on. The egg was pretty simple, 6.5 minutes soft boil, and then I repeated the egg from the last Shoyu Fundamentals video, which was marinated in water, kishibori shoyu, and mirin. This was a little bit extra. If you're just trying to scrounge together a meal out of your Thanksgiving leftovers, I know you probably didn't make a soft-boiled egg. I do have a tutorial on the channel about how to make a soft-boiled egg. It's not very hard and would be a really nice thing to put on this dish if you wanted. All right, with that being said, that's our additional toppings complete. Let's build this bowl. So I started the bowl with 50 milliliters of our Shio Tare, followed by 500 milliliters of our turkey chinton clear broth. After that came the noodles, followed by the hulking turkey leg. Next, I dressed up the bowl, first with the dressing, then the soft-boiled egg, and finally, our karage fried green beans. I finished it off with a big spoonful of our cranberry, rosemary, and sage aroma oil, and then it was time to dig in. I know that this is a video about what to do with your Thanksgiving leftovers, but this could be the whole Thanksgiving meal in a bowl. I thought that the broth and tare combination was really successful at laying down a foundation for all of these other foods. When you have your Thanksgiving meal, everything is kind of like hot and juicy, and there's like a little bit of like juice at the bottom of the plate, and that's essentially what this ramen broth ended up tasting like, which I know it's like, don't threaten me with a good time. The noodles had a really nice structure and firmness to them, which is especially important when everything else in the bowl is a little softer with the exception of the green beans. Those little guys were doing the most. Little flavor bombs. The cinnamon and brown sugar was really warm, and then as mentioned, they had this kind of like crunchy snow-like texture when you bit into them. Very fun topping. And then as all of this is going on, the dressing was just sitting in the bowl. I had said earlier it wasn't stuffing because it wasn't cooked inside the bird, so it didn't have turkey flavor. But then as I was eating, I was like, oh duh, let it take the turkey flavor from the broth. Mwah. Wonderful. But the undisputed, undeniable star of the show was that turkey leg. That was insane. insane. It was crispy, it was smoky, it was rich, and like the classic dilemma on Thanksgiving, or the nightmare that everybody tries to avoid, is overcooking the turkey because the turkey gets dry, and it's like, guess what? I've put it in soup. Don't worry, it's not getting dry. It is literally swimming in juice. I absolutely demolished this bowl, and then I made it again and went back for seconds. If you're sitting around with Thanksgiving leftovers, forget the boring turkey sandwich that you make every year. Go get yourself a high quality pack of ramen from the grocery store. Whip up some tare to spice up the broth a little bit. Throw some leftover turkey in there. Put your dressing and then some green beans on it. And then you're ready for your long winter's nap. Thank you so much for joining me for the penultimate ramen recipe of 2023. As usual, it has been a pleasure cooking for you. I can't wait to see you all next month. Please consider subscribing for more. See ya.